gentlemen have been talking all night about progress and building and everything, but a lot of the people too use the Metro bus system, which has not been talked about yet tonight. And we have been wondering, that does use the Metro bus system, how is this going to progress with everything? Because 5 to 10 years ago, the Madison Metro system was running a lot smoother without the transfer points. You could get to a bus faster from one bus to another, and you could go through town faster on the old system than you can now in the new system. What are you going to do about this? That people can go through town a lot faster and have these buses to where they're meeting at proper times at the proper points. Thank you.
Thanks. Well, the transfer system, transfer point system went in between the time that Paul was mayor and I was mayor, and I think it was an honest attempt to try to deal with a city that was growing, and that it seemed like it didn't make a lot of sense to run every bus through the downtown when we had this system, this community that was growing on the periphery. But I know it has caused dislocations as well. But let me just address Metro generally. It is a very healthy bus system. It is one of the healthiest systems anywhere in the country. We have rides now approaching 14 million a year, which is getting back to historic highs. We are actually rebuilding Metro's reserve account. It was down to nothing a few years ago. Now it's back up, I think, approaching $1 million. And there are more hours of bus service this year than there were a couple of years ago. So it's a tremendously healthy system. I really fear what Governor Walker is going to do to it, because he would cut transit aids by 10%. He threatens under his budget repair bill, essentially eliminating collective bargaining. That threatens $7 million a year in federal funding for our bus system, because the federal government requires that you have a collective bargaining system in place in order to get your federal transit aids. And to us, it's $7.1 million a year. So by extending those contracts, as we did a few weeks ago, we probably didn't cost the taxpayers money. We probably saved them maybe $14 million, $7 million over 2 years of federal transit aid that would have gone away had we not acted to make sure that those contracts were in place. But I do have grave concerns about the future of our transit system as long as we have those kinds of attitudes and approaches in state government, where at the same time that we're cutting transit aids by 10%, the governor is increasing road building by $400 million. I think that's misplaced priorities.
There was a date, I won't mention it, when I first ran for city council, and I had two platforms in that campaign. One was to attack vicious landlords, and the other was to get the city to buy what was then the Madison Bus Company. We eventually signed the 13C agreement, which Dave's referring to, which is very critical to the operation of the system. 13C agreement provides that when a public body acquires the assets of a private transit operation and then receives federal transit dollars, that the employees will not be made any worse off by their status as public employees. And that's what's coming into play now with what Governor Walker is doing. I'm sure it's Dave's hope as well as my own that if push comes to shove, our 13C contract with the federal government will trump and supersede anything that the state law does. And Dave's right about another thing I want to mention, which is, I think, just great, which is we are now getting back to the record passenger numbers that we once had. Now, when I was in those last few years when I was mayor, one of the things that was up for consideration, which we didn't do, was the bus hubs. There was something else at the time that I was interested in looking at, and that was the idea during the evenings, particularly after 7, 8 o'clock when passenger revenues would decline significantly, was to look at whether or not we should just maintain a half a dozen cross-city bus routes and then get small little feeder vans to service the rest of the city off of those big routes. That we'd save money with smaller pieces of equipment, and given that there are so few riders at that hour of the night, it might be very cost efficient to build off of another idea we had actually implemented at the time, which was from, I think, roughly Park and the base of the university to Blair Street, having, at the off-peak hours, free ridership. I think that needs to be addressed. I think we have to look at the crosstown routes again. I'd also like to see more in terms of express routes, and partnering with the adjacent and surrounding communities, because unfortunately at this point, rail's not going to be going very far. So we have to rely and build up Madison Metro.
In addition to agreeing with that, all of these things, cuts in transit aid, cuts in the earned income tax credit, cuts in the homestead credit, cuts in Medicaid, all these things coming out of Governor Walker are going to place tremendous pressure on this community and tremendous pressure on those least able to deal with them. And so we're going to have to come together as a community around that. And I wrote about it in my blog today. We thought that when Governor Walker proposed essentially cutting our employees' wages by 8.5%, that people would flee from doing their monthly contributions to charities. You know how many people have? We have over 3,000 city employees, 2. And so I think that demonstrates the generosity and the caring and the compassion of our community, and that's what we need more of over the next 4 years.
I'd like to thank Paul Southlin and Dave Chislevich for their very thoughtful answers to the very well-raised and succinct questions from all of you gathered this evening. I think it made for a wonderful hour and a half of thought-provoking information. And I want to also thank Meritor for hosting us this evening and the neighborhood associations for their sponsorship of this debate. I thank you all very much for coming.